Well, good evening to everyone. This is Life After the X. I am your host, Ty Washington, the XCon expert, and I'm here to level out the playing ground because it's all about your perspective. And so every week we're here at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can follow us on all social media platforms. That would be YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at AAU Media. You can also find more information about what I am doing, Ty Washington, through lifeafterthex.com and all the social media platforms. So, welcome again to the show. We are here every week to spill the tea. Yes, we are. As I'm sipping on some tea and talk about some tough topics that are sometimes a challenge to tackle. But again, I am the ex-con expert, and we're going to do that. So today we're going to be talking about boundaries and how experiencing your life after the X with boundaries, what it looks like when you have your what we will call our new normal, whenever you are making a drastic change in your life, shift of your mindset, you need to know what it is to establish boundaries. So we're going to talk about that, and hopefully you can gain some wisdom, some tips that will gear and promote and pull you to being your better you. And so today I am excited about sharing some things that I'm a part of. I am now the new director for the Texas region of Above the Clouds. It is a nonprofit organization that is set up for the youth ages 5 through 17. We provide arts educational programming. And the reason why I want to share that, because being appointed as the director of this program, I had to set some boundaries in my life. I had to navigate and upgrade some new levels of boundary because of my position and positioning. And so, with doing that, some of the standards and principles that I already currently live by had to be implemented with new boundaries. So, what does that look like? Okay, so we are looking for people, instructors that are Christian, that believe in the Lord, that are willing to pray during our classes, that are there to not only teach the children a arts uh, gifting and craft through their skills, but to always to be also be able to teach them about the love of Jesus. And so with that, I had to make sure that boundaries were in place, not being able to negotiate and step out of those boundaries that I've set the tone for my position and moving on to being a productive director for this organization. And not only for them, but for myself as Ty Washington Group, as a company with Life After the X, being able to encourage and motivate others when they're making their life or looking for their new life after the X, or any experience may have been traumatizing for their life, how to get your life shifted and boosted over with changing and navigating new boundaries. Because sometimes when you shift your life into a new area, sometimes you have to go in and reset those boundaries. And so some of the things that I have learned over the years is that boundaries are not just one thing. We always think just physical boundaries, just your physical boundary, the space that you allow someone to be inside of your life. And so I've always been real funny about my personal space, like give me 50 feet, give me 50 feet. And so within that, I didn't need COVID to help me stay within a 6 foot range. I was already telling to give me 50 feet somewhere in here so I can have some good breathing room space. And so that boundary was set and established. But there are also other types of boundaries that people need to be aware of, because a lot of times when we're making decisions to improve our life, especially after we've experienced something and we have that life after that experience, and we want to navigate and grow from it in a most productive way, we have to know how to set or reset those boundaries. And so I've discovered that there's not only the physical boundary, there is the sexual boundary, and that kind of fits into where if you're dating, so I'll talk about that a little bit more. We have financial boundaries, we have emotional boundaries, we have spiritual boundaries, we also have expectation boundaries, material boundaries, and we also have um, what was that last one I just investigated? I just ran across this last one. I'll come down when I get on my list. But nevertheless, we have so many different things that we have boundaries in. And one that really surprised me doing my research was about materials. Because in my thinking, I think about physical things, I think about material things, but material things, having boundaries on that, knowing how to, and it's different than a financial boundary. So when you think about a financial boundary as opposed to a material boundary, is setting those limits on things that you need to have in your life. So that could be under your material boundaries because, like, let me give you an example. I love shoes. I love shoes. One, because I'm a seamstress and I don't have to worry about spending all my money on clothes. So guess what? I accessorize like big time. And I love like earrings and I love bags and I love hats, but ain't nothing like a good pair of shoes. I mean, from pumps to flats to kicks to boots to whatever. However, I had to set some material boundaries now that I have that in there. Now, I was classifying it under my financial boundaries because I needed to make sure I stayed within a budget, especially at that time being a single mom, starting over with my new life after the ex. I needed to come home with my mindset that I did not have a job. I did not possibly have the same career, clients, and money that I made prior to then, things that had to be reestablished. And so, again, alongside of setting my personal boundaries with my space of making decisions of people, places, and things that I wanted to allow in my new life after that experience, I wanted to make sure that I had boundaries in all those areas. And so I had to understand what all of those areas look like. And a lot of times we make unsound choices and decisions because we don't realize the power of having our boundaries set in place. So that's why I want to empower you and spill the tea about these boundaries that you may not clearly understand about having in your new life after whatever you've experienced. And so, a material boundary. Again, I love shoes. So and because I do so, and I'm a natural artist and creator, I love fabric shopping. So the way someone would go and just see a nice blouse, or I see some fabric and just know what I think I want to do with it. And then it's not just that for me personally, but for me as a business owner, I may think of it may be something for a customer. And so I had to have boundaries, financial boundaries in place, not only personally but for professionally. And so you have your boundaries that you set, and so you have your personal ones, which is personal space. You have your professional ones, which include some personal space as well, because in your boundary settings, your home, you have space. Boundaries allow for family entail your spouse, your significant others, your children, your parents, your cousins, your friends, your acquaintances, whatever. Personally, then you have professional, so you have your co-workers, people that your clients, people that you're meeting, and understand that you have to have some boundaries set into place alongside of those, which when you set your principles and standards in place. And there's a big difference between principles and standards and boundaries. There is a big difference between them all. However, having those boundaries, and I always recommend writing everything down, because when you write it, you're more drawn to navigate watching it and focus on it more so than just speaking it out. Now, speaking it out is very powerful because I believe in speaking and manifesting things into your life, but I do believe in writing things down, because he said write it down and make it plain, honey. So write it down. So when you're setting those boundaries, put in your categories that if it's going to be a personal or professional of setting those boundaries. So back to the financial, I'll be out and I'm looking at all this amazing fabric and things in the store. Alongside, I already have this thing about shoes. And so I'm deciding, is this within my budget? Setting boundaries for my budget with my business and understanding what I need to stay inside of when it comes to having those things. Is it really going to be something that's very profitable for the business? Whether it's for me teaching and showing and sharing the information about the fabric that I'm looking to purchase it, or if making something and having it for that client to possibly buy. Understanding that I have to set those boundaries in place to know there is a limit that's been set upon my financial side of having inventory, so I don't be over the hill. So in case I have a small moment, like when the pandemic hit and people are not really spending, but they're spending where they need to, but not necessarily on customized things that I may be providing, then I won't go into a major sloop. And so same thing on my personal side, having those boundaries set with people. Like during the pandemic, people want to borrow money. Financial boundaries. And I can't allow people to make me feel some kind of way. So when you set those boundaries, it gives you a limit role that you can stay within for yourself, then you can also communicate it even better to other people. Because if you don't have it set into a place and space properly, then when it comes time to you being able to answer to someone who you know that you really can't financially give them something within your means, then you're going to find yourself doing something outside of that. That means you're being outside of your boundary limits. And so setting those bounds and those boundaries into place financially. So material, like I say, I thought that was I kind of just boxed those up together, but it's a big difference between the financial and the material. So again, materials that I love shoes. So I had to learn that, listen, you only have one closet. You have to share that space with your husband. So it's more than just the financial thing, it's the space of saying, Tina, do you really need all those shoes? What are you gonna do with all those shoes? Are you gonna donate some of those shoes eventually? I mean, you don't even go that many places and wear that many things. You count up particularly to the things that you like. So setting boundaries make me stay within a limit of knowing what's realistically needed in my life in this season. Do you really need that? So when you're setting your boundaries, ask some realistic, hard questions to yourself. Do you really need that? Does it really, do you have a justifiable reason for wanting what you're getting materialistically? Anything that your person, not just your shoes or clothes, but I mean, if it comes to something for your home, because some people just continuously get things and things and things for their home and they don't even need anything else in their home. But there's a materialistic boundary that you have to learn how to set the tone and the pace for having that. Same thing with the sexual thing. You know, whether you're in a relationship with someone, um, like married or dating, but even if you're not sexually, understanding what those boundaries look like. Some people don't understand that they sexually harass you without you even realizing it because you don't have boundaries set. They'll come and tap you or touch you a certain kind of way, and I love to get hugs with people that I love, but I'm not no huggy, you touchy me when I don't really know you. Understanding how to set that not only personally but professionally, because sometimes when I meet new people, it might be at an event or a function, and I want to be very hospitable. I want to be very professional, but then I still want my space respected, and I don't want you to sexually violate me because you're touching my physical person. So the physical is different than the sexual, because there are different types of touches, and people don't understand that. You may think somebody just touch you like this right here and it feels like a physical boundary being violated, but they may touch you and their whole intention sends a different type of energy that becomes now sexual more so than physical. And so understanding what those clearly look like, and I really want to encourage you to research these boundaries even deeper, so therefore you know when you're being violated in that space what's happening and how you can set the tone to change that. But if you start ahead of the game, like me, when I made that discovery, I understood, hey, I facilitate a class. I work with a lot of men that are just coming home from being incarcerated in my class, and they have to understand how I have boundaries set, not only respecting me while doing that class to gain what they need from me as their facilitator for the class, but making sure they understand that, because some of them may not even really care that I'm married. Some people just don't care, and so they don't respect a relationship between someone when they share that. And so I have to set the tone of heaven, because I have already established what my safe zone limitation boundaries are within my classroom facilitation with these gentlemen. They understand that even if I was single, it's certain things that you're just not allowed to say, do, with me and around me. And that's not only with me, but if it's a young lady in my class, I'm going to make sure that they understand the boundaries that I'm expecting of them to have within my classroom. These gentlemen and some women too, understanding what that looks like. And so set that tone for your physical and your sexual boundaries. Make sure that you have that clarity of what that looks like and what that feels like for you, so you don't feel violated. Because again, sometimes it could be so subtle that you don't realize that something is brooding behind the scene because there was not a boundary set into place. And believe it or not, a lot of traumatic things that have happened in people's lives that I've discovered over the years, including mine, happened because there were no boundaries set into place. A lot of things happen because It was so subtle, it was unexpectedly done. I was didn't know what to do. I made a un wise decision and choice in the matter, whether it was a reaction to the situation, but because I did not understand fully about my boundaries and how I can set the tone for having them in place so people will know what's expected of them with me, period, in my life. And so alongside of the physical, the sexual, the financial, the material, because those again they kind of seem to similar, like the physical and sexual and the material and the financial. You have the emotional boundaries. Listen, I always talk about this emotional boundary when I'm talking about physical abuse or abuse as a whole, because people only think about physical abuse because it's more visual than all of the other ones. But there are so many layers to abuse, just like boundaries. And so, like when I think about the emotional boundaries, you have to set that tone in place, what your limitations you will allow with people personally and professionally within your life. So therefore, when you have your new life after whatever you're experiencing, when you are shifting in your life, you want to make sure that those things, those tones are being set into place, because of abuse can happen again so subtly, so unexpectedly, because people have not set those tones and those boundaries into place. And so people abuse verbally, uh emotionally, mentally, financially, spiritually, long aside the physical part. So then it becomes an emotional boundary that has been taken out of context. So when you set your emotional boundary, like, you cannot talk to me any kind of way. Like, you can't control someone else, but you can set the tone of how they will be with you when they're in your presence, in your space, in your place. And so, but if you haven't set that for yourself and put that upon yourself to have into place, then people don't know. People sometimes do things because they can, one, by default, be just who they are. Some people try things just to see what they can get away with, and clearly, just because they don't know what your boundaries are emotionally, they don't know if you've tapped that already, you've been gone through something that's already got you on the edge. Very similar to me leading up to my situation, my boundaries emotionally was not in place, so therefore it was easy for the abuse to happen in all the different layers and stages. So therefore, because I didn't have emotional boundaries in place, let allow knowing what levels of things for people to know how to respect me, how to honor me, how to handle me, whether it be an action or a word. And so either one of them can be a part of taking the emotional boundary out of context. So you have to set the tone for your emotional boundaries so you'll know, because nobody knows more than you what affects you, whether it's a word or something that they've done. And then you'll have this disposition or a feeling or emotion that's been going on behind the scene that could brew up at any point, because you haven't emotionally, or you haven't set your emotional boundaries into place. And so that was a good one that I discovered, because again, thinking about the physical, we kind of sometimes box all that into one category, and they really have distinctive things that need to be addressed to make sure that your life is fully balanced out. And so, alongside that, is another one is expectation boundaries. Let me tell you, people have to understand that when you have expectation boundaries, people expect things that they shouldn't be expecting. And I have been at fault of expecting things that I should have not been expecting. And people have expected things from me that they should have not been expecting, but I didn't have any expectation boundaries. And so, what does an expectation boundary look like? Okay, well, I am in a new relationship. In a relationship, I'm just going to give a snippet in here. It's not just something within your family, that can be within a friend, it could be personal, it could be professional. So any type of relationship setting that you've walked into your life or been approached with inside this situation, you have to have expectation or boundaries in place. It's just almost like doing a life business plan. What are your swaps? What's your strengths? What's your weaknesses? What's the opportunities? And what's the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? What things really offend you? What things are pet peeves? What are you sensitive about? So you know that when you enter into this relationship, whether it's professional or personal, what are you expecting from it? Is it a reasonable expectation to have into place when you enter into that relationship situation? And so having those expectation boundaries in place and being clear about them, whether it's from you to someone else or from that individual coming back into you, you want to make sure you have clearly defined what you want to have in place when it comes to expectations. So let me give you an example. So I do business with a lot of different type of situations, personally with family, with clients who I may not know. They just find me clients that have come through referral. So I'm gonna go with the clients that come through referral and family, because that's usually where I have had to stiffen up my expectation boundaries. They expect me to give them a discount or waive certain things, fees or charges that I would have set into place with my business, but they're coming to me because they referred, because they're a family or close friend acquaintance, and they feel as though they expect these things from me. So I had to reset my expectation boundaries that this is a business. If you went over here to do business with this individual, would you expect that from them? Because you shouldn't expect that. And then me on the other side, I shouldn't expect that when they come to me, that they should want to come to me because I am in the same industry of a service that they may need. I don't expect that of people. I would like for them to come to me for certain business, but I don't expect that because I know you know someone who knows me and does business with me, or because we're family and you should just bring all your business my way. So I have boundaries, expectations that are set for me, and I have those that are set for other people, and I know how to stay within those boundary limits that I've set upon myself. So therefore, the offenses can be minimized. You can't miss them all. Life's just is just going to happen, and some people are just going to be offended. They're going to be hurt, disappointed, upset, angry, mad, and whatever else, because you have set. And typically when people get upset with you when you set boundaries in your life, there probably was not no good for you anyway. That's what I've learned from a lot of the upgrading of my boundaries that I've set in all the different categories. Now that I have a clarity of what they all look like, I have had so many relationships that severed because they had to see what those new boundaries look like. And because I did not know about them, how powerful they was, and how much more productive they would be in my life by just implementing those changes. It made a whole drastic in preparing me and becoming what I'm doing as not only an entrepreneur going to the next level of incorporating her business, as being assigned the director of an organization that's 20-year existing and want me to head and be the face of it for another whole location in another whole state. That speaks volumes of them understanding that I know about representing them, and I'm going to have boundaries that I can implement in place, not only for me and keeping that in place for them with their business. So we're going to take a small break. I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about some more of these different boundaries. So therefore you can be bound to be successful in your new life after the X, as well as myself. And I look forward. So we are here every week at 7 p.m. I just want to jog this in again for those who are just coming on. This is Life After the X. I'm Ty Washington, the X-Con expert. We're here every week at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're here Thursday for the next few months. We usually on Tuesday, but we're here on Thursday. So just kind of reset your tones to be hanging out with me on this day. And we're here to level out the playing grounds by talking about tough topics. We're can be found on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at AAU Media. And you can also find more about Ty Washington Group with lifeafterthex.com and all across the social media platforms. So we'll be back in just a small moment. Stay tuned.
Throw and Tuck. It's handmade by myself, and you only can get it here, and it's patent, and it's only here at Rococo Design. It's like a regular pillow, or you can take the blanket out like so, fluff up the pillow, open up your blanket, wrap it around yourself, And then you can lay on your sofa and relax with your pillow throw and tuck. When you're done with it, just flip it over. When you don't want the blanket anymore, you just fold it over twice. Fold it over twice again. Fold it over. And tuck it in the back. And there you go. You're back to the pillow throw and tuck. The Coco Design.
Welcome back to Life After the X. I'm Ty Washington, the X-Con expert. We are here every week, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're here talking about the topic of setting boundaries, healthy boundaries, and what it looks like when you do set them, what you can gain from them. So a few of the other ones that I've already talked about, and I'm going to navigate, to some of the other ones is going to be, I've talked about the physical and the sexual, how they make a big difference between the two. They can be very similar, but they have a lot of differences between the financial and the material boundaries, which they have a lot of similarities, but they can be very different. And then I've spoken about the emotional boundary, but the last three ones that I've done some research on is intellectual, time, and spiritual. So I'm gonna talk about this spiritual one. And so yes, I want to just thank my sponsor, Rukuku, this evening, honey. I tell you, I love pillows, and so every time I see that, I'm like, man, I just need to make me some more pillows because I just love pillows. And so thank you so much for sponsoring the show this evening. But spiritual boundaries, that is huge. People, even if they're not walking in the faith of just being a Christian, but they just have they experiencing their spirituality and stuff, and so they say, that just didn't hit my spirit very well. Well, I'm gonna speak from a Christian perspective when they're using the God's word. There are so many people who do not know how to set their boundaries into place. And I'm gonna tell you, the best way to have it in place is to get the Holy Spirit on your side, dwelling within you, and listen to him when he's talking to you. And then your boundaries will be automatically set, because he got natural boundaries that are automatically in place based on the word of God and the scriptures, that they will back you and stand with you and for you. But when you're setting spiritual boundaries, how people boundaries can be taken out if you don't know how to set those into places, that when someone don't know the word of God, they're a babe in Christ, and they're still trying to make this great change. They start this new life after X as a Christian, and they're walking their journey, and they encounter someone who knows the word just a tad bit more than them. That might be the devil at times, because he know it. He just twists it up to use it to his advantage and our disadvantage. But so that you set spiritual boundaries in place, you have to set that tone and what you will allow when you know realistically what you can handle. So when it comes to that spiritual boundary, know your reality. You know that you're still learning the word of God. You have to be cautious of who you have around your space. And so because people will take the word of God out of context to pull you in to be on their side for something that you totally may not believe in. And so if you don't have your spiritual boundaries set into place, then people can take you for granted, and it lures into some of the other areas of boundaries that will be trampled over because of that. So not only if they trample into your spiritual boundaries, they'll start to tamper with your emotional boundary space that's being violated, as well as possibly your physical and your sexual. Some people may lose their financial boundary, because some people will take advantage of you financially inside of your spiritual boundaries that's taken out of context by using the spirituality. And so I would encourage you to do your due diligence and understand that there is a big difference between all the different boundaries and how you can have them in place when you're preparing to be more productive and successful in your life, when you're setting your standards and your principles that you want to stand on in place, knowing what boundaries you need to have in place. So the next one is going to be about time. Listen, huge, 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 huge. All I kind of mix time up there with physical as well, because thinking my person is right over there in this time and space. We kind of coexist in there together. But my time boundary, I used to have it all out of Kawu. People would just take advantage of my time boundary. How do people do would try to do that? Because I work from home. And so because I work from home, people just think I'm just readily available for them. I am not just available for you because I work from home. Just like when you go to your job and you can't just answer your phone all the time, I just can't answer my phone all the time. I have to take my time and be respectful of how I handle my time for my personal and for my professional space with work and with my home life. And so I had to set the tone and boundaries in place for time, because again, without having it in place, people will take it for granted. People will just assume, oh well, she's home, I could just stop by there. Or say they come by my home and they see my vehicle here. Just because my vehicle here don't mean I'm here. I might have rolled out with somebody. My time is being violated because you assume, because you see this or you think you know this, that you're just gonna fit yourself into whatever. I figured you were just home. You had some time on your hand. Don't assume. But I had to set the boundaries in place. These are my work hours. These are my personal hours. This is the time when my husband comes home. I want to be home with my husband in present, in the real time with him, acknowledging him, because that's a personal thing for me as his spouse. So I try to govern that time boundary with people who may come over to see. You have all this time to see me. You will not just come and want to overextend your time because you don't have something going on in your life. But people will do that because you haven't set the tone of your boundaries with your time in every area of your life. My time as a for Tina, my time as a director for the organization, my time with Ty Watch the Group with my company, my time with my personal assistant, my time with my friends, my time with my ministry, my time as a mother with my children, my time as a daughter with my mother, my time, period, needs to be set into boundaries with each individual and entity, so I know that my time is not being wasted, because I have made some choices and decisions that has wasted so much of my time. Thank you for God's grace and mercy that's been so readily available to give me some extra time to do what he created me to be able to do, because he's working it all for my good, because I do love him and I know that I'm called accordingly. But if it wasn't for all of those amazing variables because of God, think about the time I would have wasted because I did not have no boundaries in place. So yes, get your time boundaries in place. Set the tones and the limits that you want to have in every area of your life with time, so therefore you can be most productive in your life. Because again, time is something you cannot get back. You cannot make up for it. And let me tell you, when it's gone and the person comes back and they've wasted your time, they're not even going to feel no kind of way about it. It's going to be short lived. They may be apologetic about 5 minutes, but here you are stuck with not accomplishing what you were meant to accomplish within that time span. So make sure that you are setting those time boundaries into place. Hello, come on, somebody. And the other one is intellectual boundaries. Let me tell you, as a creative, this one just when I discovered it, it was like I didn't even realize that I had to set a tone for that in my life, not only as an individual, but as a professional individual. Because when I have an idea and I share it, girl, that is not in demand. People don't really need that. Do not let people disrespect your intellectual boundaries. If you are a creative spirit and you know that God has blessed you with something that you know that's going to be phenomenal, sometimes you have to set boundaries on yourself and don't share them with everybody. So I had to set boundaries and limits upon myself what I share with people. my intellectual properties and my ideas and these things that I know that God has entrusted me with. But then I also set the tone of what I will not allow you to come into my space and do to me. So when I discover that with certain individuals, I know how to govern myself with that. So, but again, them understanding what I'm expecting back from them, so they know how to communicate. If it's something that you're just not so for it, and you have not been put into that particular space to give me that type of response back, my boundary. I set the tones of my intellectual ideas in a boundary of who I'm sharing it with, when I'm sharing it, how I'm sharing it. So therefore, I know that it will not be violated. And typically, us artists, we're very sensitive about our stuff. Yes, we are. And so therefore, we have to mind our own emotional well-being. So therefore, we have to set that boundary and tone and limitation for what we expect to have within our boundaries of our intellectual ideas. And so again, I sure hope that you gain some wisdom from some of these boundaries. There are so many different individualized types of boundaries that can be violated, that are so distinctively different that you have to understand where they fit into your life, whether it's personal and professional. So therefore, that when you are experiencing your life after the X, your new environment that you're moving into to become better, greater, wiser, more productive, instrumental in your purpose and your passion, you have to have boundaries set. And so I really hope that you gain something this year. Don't let this be the end. Go do your homework, do some research, find out about all those boundaries in more details. Make sure you get those in place. I am working on a boundary workbook that I will have available for sale. When I get through having it together, we will talk about that again. I am doing it as a compliment alongside, because I do have a book that I published called From Bound to Bound. And inside of that book, I talked about boundaries. And the reason why I talked about that, because I kind of wrote what my life looked like while I was incarcerated, in the conversations that I had with those who had been incarcerated alongside me, and the things that we made bad decisions upon that brought us to the spot where we were to get us being incarcerated. And a lot of it was because of the lack of having boundaries and not knowing how to move bound out and move forward. And so I did talk about what boundaries look like and how to set a bound into place and how to bound forward and bounce back from a not having boundaries in your space. And so since I had that part inside of my book, in my poetry book about From Bound to Bound, I decided to do a complimentary workbook that talked about it more in depth, so people can go in and kind of journal what that looks like, set your tones for what healthy boundaries are, what unhealthy boundaries look like, the lack of not having them, some of the repercussions and the consequences that you will fall into because you have not set those into place. What happens when you make choices and decisions based on not having boundaries or having too stiff of boundaries, because sometimes you can have them too rigid, too tough, even on yourself and other people, that is unrealistic. So being able to understand them fully and clearly will make you be even more productive in your life after whatever you've experienced. And I tell you, with my life after the X, of all my levels of it, because not only in my life after being incarcerated, life after being from domestic violence, life after being a widow, life after dropping out of college and going back to school, I have so many layers of my life after the X, and experiences that setting those boundaries and those tones and limits into place was very instrumental and very needed for me to have in place. And so I want to encourage you to do that. And so again, thank you for hanging out with us for this segment. I am, I'm sipping on a little tea. I had a little bit while we was on break. And honey, let me tell you, it's cold in Texas. It's cold in Texas. And this hot tea is doing something for me. You hear me? The hot tea is doing something for me. Is that poetry in motion? Let me tell you. So just want to spill that tea with you. And so the tip I have for this week, the tip for the week is set some boundaries. Do your due diligence, do your homework, and set some boundaries. The reason why I say that, because here's the second part of the tip. If you do not set the boundaries, you will be bound. If you do not set the boundaries, you will be bound. And when you're bound, you you're bound to fail because of that. So set the boundaries. Set the bounds, or you'll be bound, and then you will be bound to fail in what you're trying to be successful in. So I pray that the tip will encourage you to do your due diligence, look more into what boundaries look like, how to set them for yourself in every area of your life. Don't be just limited to just the physical boundary, because there are so many layers to the physical, because it does include the sexual at times. Knowing and understand the difference between the financial and the material, because they have a lot of similarities with setting the boundaries in those areas in your life. Time, making sure that time boundaries in place, so therefore you do not waste time in your life, and you can be most productive for yourself and other people in your life. Intellectual, if you're creative and you're creating things and starting and doing things, have boundaries in place so people don't make you feel inadequate or weird or odd or wrong about your intellectual properties and ideas and thoughts that you set the boundaries on, because they were given to you, and you have to set the boundaries and limits and tolerance for that. As well as the emotional, make sure that you have that in place, because again, when your emotional boundaries are being trampled over, it rolls over to other areas of your life, like the physical and the sexual. The emotional boundaries have to be in place, and again, sometimes it get intertwined between the physical, the sexual, and the emotional, because they can all again tie in together. That leads into that type of abuse. That can be all types of layers of it involved in there. And as well as the uh expectation boundary, knowing what to expect from people, what people can expect from you, but having those boundaries in place, so therefore you're not doing something that's unexpected of you, like, because people just assume if they do this, you ought to do that. And it can happen it's so subtle. It can just happen before you know it. You're making a unwanted choice and decision that you got to face the consequences of, because you didn't have that boundary in place of expectations with every area, professionally and personally. I mean, and let me tell you, not only do you need to get them in place, do updates. Don't just stop by implementing them. Let me tell you, in every area of my life, I do an update. 3 to 6 months, people's lives have shifted and changed. I'm almost like what they call the iPhones that come out every 5 minutes. I do updates, because when you are experiencing life, growing older, wiser, and better, you have to do updates, because what was expected, or the boundary level that you had for your time in one age era of your life, or one stage of your life, it may be different as your life shifts on as you get older. And so therefore you have to be willing to go and do updates. You see your phone update, you see your computer got updates, everything got updates, right? You have to do updates. So when you set your boundaries into place in all those different areas, and again, like I said, there's so many, but those are some of the main ones that I kind of just dabbed in this evening about. Do your due diligence, but be in the know that they have to have updates done as well. So again, I hope that helped you a lot. I'm glad that you were here hanging out with us. Please do share and like our show. Share it with some friends. Go on YouTube and subscribe. Be a part of our family at All About Us Global Media Production. Just come on and hang out with us. Also, join the family of Life After the X, because I know you probably got something you want to share with me. So if you want to be a guest on the show, you can reach out to me via email, through the website, through the comments. You can leave a comment here. And also, if you know someone who may want to be a guest, please send them my information, so therefore they can come on and we can talk about some of these topics that I like to address. Because again, I'm going to talk about topics that people sometimes don't want to get in and just share the grime about. Today, it wasn't as punch you in the eye with it, but I'm gonna tell you, your eye gonna get punched in if you ain't taking care of your boundaries being in place. Okay, because again, I got into my situation that caused my charge because I did not have any boundaries. I caught my charge because what? I didn't have any boundaries in place. So it can happen before you realize it. So that's why it's important and imperative that you do that. And that's why I want to talk about those things that need to be in place when you have your new life, or you start a your new life after whatever you've experienced already, and you want to make sure that you become better inside of it to do that. So we're here every week at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find us on all social media platforms. That is YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at AAU Media. And you can also find out more about me, Ty Washington, the Ex-Con expert, on Life After the X, and it's across the board, social media wise, as well as the website, lifeafterthex.com. Thank you so much again for hanging out with me. I'm going to let them do another small commercial. I'm going to come in and we're going to talk about what's coming on for next week, as well as you get to see my video with my theme song for Life After the X. So thank you so much, and we'll be back shortly.
You're listening to All About Us Radio. We're live streaming 24/7, playing old school versus new school. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at AAU Media, and visit our website, www.aaumedia.com. Call us at 1-833-369-1444, extension 1, and leave us an inspirational message or request. You're listening to All About Us Radio.
So welcome back to Life After the X. That was a boop, bam. Here you go. You're back on the live, honey bunny. So this is our Life After the X, and I'm Ty Washington, the Ex-Con expert. So next week is going to be a great show. I have a good friend of mine who I actually did time with again as well. Going to have some of my sisters come on here and share about their Life After the X experience. She's not only someone I did some time with, but she's also an author and a poet, and it's some things that we have so many things that we have in common that we've experienced. So she's going to come on and talk about her life, some of the things she's experienced. She's going to share some things because I don't want to go into what my topic going to be about, because see, I want you to come back and check us out, but it's going to be good. Okay. She's going to be really interesting. Like, she's going to grab your attention just like the guest from last week did. Going to just grab your heart and give you some very good information that's going to encourage you and someone in your family about the topic that we're going to talk about. So come back next week on next Thursday at 7 p.m. Central and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and check out the show. So we're getting ready to get out of here. I just want to encourage you to never let anyone X you out, because baby, guess what? Any X will do. And if they don't want your X, we do, because we on Life After the X. We want to talk about your life after the experience that you've lived through, that's going to give someone some valuable advice and tips to encourage them on their journey to their new life after the X. So thank you so much again for joining us on this week's show. Please enjoy the song. I'm going to be back over here jamming on the background with it. So Life After the X. Take care.
Something that had them down, bumps and bruises along the way, it's so profound. So you gotta get up, brush yourself off. It's not the end of the world. Straighten up and hold your head high. Walk in faith and believe in yourself, and you will come out living after the end. Life after the X. We all experience it in our lifetime. After the end. Life after the X. Learn from your circumstance and you will survive. You can live.
What did you learn? What did you? Life is the bridge. What did you burn? Take a page from book and elevate yourself. This is how you celebrate yourself. Move on and try to elevate your wealth. A lesson learned for your own purpose. Own purpose. Soul searching is the way you improve. When you got something to lose, you keep the risk low. The best teacher is experience. A quick quote.
Never discount your experiences. There's a lot for you to learn from every fall, twist and turn. And no matter what they say about you, they can feel any way about you. Anyway, it's all for you to live in, all for you to give, all for you to learn from, all for you to life and give it a go. Oh, hey, 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 hey. Life after the edge. Life after the edge. Life after the experience. Life after the edge. Life after the edge. Life after the experience. Life after the X. Life after the X.
All right, there we go. So thank you so much for hanging out with us. So again, that was my theme song to Life After the X. That was my son and my daughter featured on the video, and I have a choreographer who I've done some wardrobe for. And he's going to eventually be a guest on the show too and talk about being a choreographer and an educator and everything like that. So thank you so much for checking that out and enjoying this time with us this evening. So we look forward to hanging out with you on next week. Have a blessed day.